Hello and welcome to Modern Mondays here at Guardian Games in Portland, Oregon. We're Portland Paper. You're hanging out in the booth with me, Travis Cooper, and
Ian Lunger.
so if you had to have superlatives for yourself, what would they be?
I mean, I would probably call myself an SCG champion,
Oh,
even though
but you can't do that.
I'm not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
that's Vinny, who's not here tonight, or maybe
Oh,
playing tonight.
well, welcome back, everybody. We got 4 rounds of Modern Magic, the old-fashioned way, with paper cards here, and we have kind of a throwback to like 2015 for round number one.
It is Blue Moon, played by Zeke Rosenberg, against Jun, played by Nat Crossman.
So
What
how
a
good do you
weird.
think Blood Moon's going to be in this matchup?
Uh, I mean, it kind of depends on if Nat recognizes early and decides to play around it by fetching basics. So I think, yeah, Nat's kind of instincts as to what he's playing against when his senses tingle. That will kind of determine whether Blood Moon gets him or not.
I've also talked to Nat and played him a fair amount of times, and he's running a high basic count for a Jund deck. He's on 5 basics, and his argument for that is when you're playing Rin and 6, you can't really afford to like keep fetch shocking yourself to play everything on curve. So he usually just fetches and shocks once, and then is going to get basics after that if there's a Rin and 6. If there's not a Rin and 6, it kind of changes up how you sequence your lands. But
Right, yeah, that the deck change of adding Ren has kind of made you more likely to fetch basics kind of after the first fetch.
the old lightning axe yourself, turn 1 play. And we see a hand of a couple bolts, a couple thought scours, Mystic Sanctuary, Scalding Tarn, and Island.
Huh. So it doesn't really give away what deck we're on.
I guess the thought scours maybe are there because you're playing Mystic Sanctuary to have like really good targets for your Mystic Sanctuary from after the first couple turns without having to cast spells.
Yeah, I wonder if there's a way that you could think that Zeke was on some like interesting build of Grixis. Whenever I see Thought Scour in Modern, I'm immediately just thinking like, oh, they must have Gurmag Angler or some other payoff.
Or it like cues maybe some combo centric graveyard things going on.
Sure, yeah,
Like, is this trying to be a Arclight Phoenix deck?
right. Are we really throwing back? It's been a while since, yeah.
Yeah, 2015. Was Lantern Control a deck in 2015?
That seems like a little early for Lantern Control. I thought but years go by, right?
Yeah, time flies.
Okay.
All right, we got a Bob.
Nat
Bobberoo.
and cleared the way for Bob getting 2 lightning bolts with the 2 discard spells, and then Zeke tossing one with the Thought Scour off the top of the deck. So Bob might make it.
Zeke has a Blood Moon right now. I wonder if you're gonna deploy the Thing in the Ice or the Blood Moon. We're going for the Blood Moon. Nice mountain.
I'm definitely on board with Zeke's decision to get the Blood Moon down as quickly as possible.
Bob doing what Bob does best, flipping over some lands, taking damage.
Nat's got my favorite art, Bob. Oh, OG Bob.
I guess it it makes a pretty huge difference getting that Blood Moon down and then following up with Thing in the Ice because you're shutting off most removal spells that Nat will be able to play. And maybe it's worth Nat drawing a couple cards that they can't cast for a few turns.
Certainly. If you'd waited a turn, then there's a chance that Nat would have, that fetch land that Nat has now, he could have gotten a black source, which would enable Fatal Push here.
Well, that Liliana's not coming down for quite a while.
Nope. They still found room for flavor text on this card. Isn't that, what a wonderful thing.
I do like when you have the iconic cards that are designed by players that have the actual player on them. I like using the original art for those cards.
Yes.
In general, I like original art Ooh, this could be a cool way to maybe hit an Assassin's Trophy or an Abrupt Decay.
Or a Liliana, any number of things, and Nat missed them all. But you know, if the thing flips and the Blood Moon's tossed back to Nat's hand, that's not the worst situation in the world.
Or if the Blood Braid, not Blood Moon, right?
Excuse me, yes.
It'd be cool
Yeah.
if Pink could do that. Yeah, Blood Moon deck with one island right now.
Yeah, not terribly easy for Zeke to chain cantrips here.
Huh. I would have thought about maybe just thought scouring myself, thinking or looking to draw a lightning bolt on my own turn if I was Zeke there.
Looking to draw.
Yep, but unless you value that spell snare, maybe
Yeah,
that makes sense. That was probably a pretty tough decision.
right. I guess it's fairly marginal. You were thinking to get the Bob off the table,
Yeah.
like before Nat gets another activation. Bob's value is like relatively low in this situation with Nat unable to cast a lot of spells, but I guess this does, at this point, it does feel like it's going to be a tough climb for Zeke to get out. Playing Archmage's Charm in a deck with Blood Moon is interesting.
Also, the Mystic Sanctuary, obviously mount into this situation. But even though they're dyssynergies, I can still see why you play those cards. Because, when your Blood Moon deck, when Blood Moon doesn't matter in the matchup, you want to have other cards that give you a lot of value.
Right. It does seem like this version of the deck is kind of leaning on Blood Moon to be an extreme haymaker. You know, like just shut Titan out of the game haymaker. Because the deck doesn't seem to be able to, at least from the start of this game, like play through it that easily.
Yeah, I mean, Zeke's Blood Moon actually doing some damage for Zeke right here because we've got, Cryptic Command, Archmage's Charm, like uh, lots of double, triple blue spells stuck in hand.
Yeah, Zeke with a pretty sweet altered Force of Negation. Up there in the yard.
Ooh, that's big.
Goyf joins the fight.
I don't know how you get out of this.
Yeah, especially with only one blue source. If there were multiple blue sources, I could see like a Thing in the Ice line. Okay. And Nat will take game one here.
Sideboards. We should get like a little jingle for when we go to sideboards.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
be the next thing.
all right,
Sideboard
looking
jingles.
at Nat, we've got two Fulminator Mages, a Liliana, the Last Hope, Plague Engineer, a Huntmaster of the Fells, three Graph Cages, two Collective Brutalities, a Choke, an Ashiok, and two Pillages.
I'm in for the choke. Always in for the choke.
Yeah, you are.
I also like Plague Engineer here, just because you haven't seen Pyromancer, but I don't know. I have the feeling that Zeke has Pyromancer in the deck, and I feel like your main game plan is pretty good against Thing in the Ice, as long as you don't get Blood Mooned. Like if you're able to play Lilianas or cast Fatal Pushes, then I think your game plan's pretty good against what Zeke's got going on.
I'm kind of into Fulminator Mage for two reasons. One, when playing against a control deck, if you can constrain their mana, that's a way to win. And two, if you happen to, be playing against a Resolved Blood Moon, you can always cast those.
It's true.
Looks like for Zeke, we've got a Jace. Let's see, which Jace is this guy? This is... Oh man, having a hard time reading that. It's a +1, -2, -5 Jace. Is that?
Oh man, which one is that?
We have Ral, Damping Sphere ×2, Ceremonious Rejections, a couple Surgicals, an Anger of the Gods, 2 Ashiok, 2 Disdainful Strokes, and Entrancing Melody. That's pretty sweet. And a Braid, and another Anger of the Gods. Oh, I think that's a Jace Architect of Thought is what we've got hanging out there, which that's a pretty cool one. You know, pluses to give your opponents attacking creatures, +1 or -1, -0. You can sort of do a little factor fiction with the -2, and the -8 is pretty sweet, but that rarely happens. I feel like this is usually boarded in against like token strategies or to slow down creature matchups, and I could see boarding in that card in this matchup just to have, you know, a card that generates some card advantage as well.
Huh. So this is your solution to go wide then? If you're Zeke's side? I guess this is an interesting inclusion. I haven't really seen this card played much in Modern.
So I used to before Jason Mind Sculptor got unbanned, I would play this on some blue control decks, and then even after that, you see it pop up occasionally when there's like a lot of token strategies around. And it's also decent just, you know, drawing cards, threatening a really powerful ultimate. Especially if you're maxed out on Jaces and you want some more card advantage, throw in another Jace.
There's plenty of Jaces to go around. So taking a look back at opening hands here. Did look like Zeke has at least one island hiding in there.
Do you leave the Blood Moons in if you're Zeke?
I would leave 1 or 2 in for sure.
Yeah.
I think you get, well, I don't know. I was going to say I think you get enough value, but seeing as how you do turn off your own Mystic Sanctuaries and like the way that Zeke's deck is built, it does seem like Blood Moon is possibly a problem.
I might leave 1 in, just because it can randomly be really good and kind of acts as removal for like a Raging Ravine, but I don't think I'd ever want to see 2 of them, and I kind of don't, if my opponent like Assassin's Trophy my Blood Moon, I sort of wouldn't really care too much about that.
Right, and you think you're going to get a bit of equity here with Nat likely fetching basics, but Unafraid, maybe Nat expecting Zeke to board out of the Blood Moons and just, or you know, sometimes you get those Jund hands that you really just, you need access to your mana and you can't really play around Blood Moon that well while actually having a functional hand.
I see a Liliana the Veil in Nat's hand.
There's also the Wren this turn, and the Wren will get back the fetch land. So as long as the Blood Moon's not like right on time.
Especially if you then like fetch for basic forest right now.
Yeah. And from this open, like I said, as long as Zeke doesn't slam the Blood Moon here, you're going to be able to fetch up all your basics in the next few turns.
I haven't seen Remand in a long time, but I don't think that Zeke has Remands in the deck. Oh, a little petty theft action going on here.
Brazen Borrow seems pretty medium against Wrenn and 6.
Pretty medium against Wrenn and 6, also against Liliana the Veil. I think maybe we bounced that because we have a follow-up Archmage's Charm.
Right. Yeah, wanting to at least get some, like, better than not bouncing it. You know, if you don't have any other reason, if you don't have anything else to do with the mana here.
It's been interesting to see a resurgence in like blue-red control, blue moon type decks lately. I've seen a lot of Through the Breach decks hanging out, and it's like that got spell snared. I know the spell snare was in hand last turn too. So
really?
Yeah, I'm curious why we didn't just spell snare it when it first came down.
Yeah, that's a bit surprising to me as well. Unless Zeke has 2 Thought Scours that they're looking to fire off here or something, just wanting to be mana efficient, but looks like there's another Borrower in hand as well.
Yep, Cryptic's on top with the Mystic Sanctuary trigger.
So we get to see here if Nat's actually wanting to play around Blood Moon by fetching another basic, or if we're going to see... Okay.
Yeah. Looks like he is.
It feels pretty free at this point. The only times you're going to notice it are if you're, for example, like get a Scavenging Ooze out and you want multiple activations. You're going to be constrained by having, potentially less lands that double in green. I imagine Nat's not playing a build that requires double red, so occasionally if you're trying to double spell on Jund, it can be problematic if you're fetching up basics, but for the most part, you're still able to play your game of every turn slam a threat.
Yeah, I think usually just wanting to have a bunch of black and a bunch of green for like Scavenging Ooze activations, etc. A whole Murderous Rider.
Little naked Murderous Rider. Do you think Nat's baiting something here? Or just trying to be mana efficient?
Well, it feels like Nat's not super afraid of a combo right now, so maybe you're just playing your worst cards first to try to run Zeke out of counter spells, but we do know that the Cryptic's on the top.
Right. And I do like getting a threat. If that was kind of Nat's only option to get a threat on board, I definitely can get behind just getting a threat on board to force Zeke to make the first move here, potentially.
And lifelink isn't irrelevant when you're playing against these blue-red decks.
And it's really, if Zeke has to fire off this Brazen Borrower to bounce the Murderous Rider, that's not much of a loss for Nat.
Ooh, I think we're going to counter draw here.
Yeah, I think I almost would have liked to see the attack first with the Murderous Rider, although maybe Nat's going to play a Blood Moon here.
Liliana the Veil. So Nat
Okay.
without
Or,
the Blood Moons
excuse
in his
me.
deck.
Yeah, excuse me. A Bloodbraid Elf.
Okay.
I'm getting
Getting all the bloods confused.
Yeah, the different bloods.
See a Mountain go to the bin for Zeke's discard.
I do think Nat did a good job of clearing the way for Lily to come down here.
I feel like Zeke is flooding out here a bit. I mean, you always want to hit your land drops when you're playing control decks, but not a lot of spells that Zeke has actually cast.
Yeah, that kind of explains the decision to just fire off the Cryptic and counter draw, because I think Zeke is just needing to find some sort of action here. So Zeke pondering whether we're going to run out this Brazen Borrower. Can do both, can bounce and drop it, but if you bounce the Lily, then Lily can come back down and plus again. Okay, so Zeke looking to empty
Is this a Cryptic?
his hand here. It is a Cryptic. So, this is tough because you draw here and then you probably immediately discard whatever it is. And it looks like it's a force of negation, so...
That's an okay one to filter through, I guess.
It's kind of an interesting sequence there. Zeke does get all of Nat's stuff off the board here for a moment.
It's like, is that better than just pitching the Brazen Borrower to Lily's Plus is the question.
Right, exactly.
Because then you still have the option of bouncing something at the end of turn with Cryptic and drawing a card, and you'd end up with a card in your hand, where right now you have the Brazen Borrowers like in the adventure zone, so kind of like a card in hand.
Right. I mean, Nat does ultimately end up discarding 2 cards here to your 1, but Jund usually isn't too unhappy to discard. Like playing the top deck war is not a bad thing for Jund. So I can definitely see the reasons for either line. Zeke will be able to use some of this font of mana to run out the Brazen Borrower at end of turn here. Hopefully get some damage in on this Lily.
And cryptic commands on top of the deck. It's interesting. But Tarmogoyf has traditionally been a pretty hard creature for blue-red based decks to take out.
Yes. Yeah. Magmatic Sinkhole is decently helpful in that situation because at the very least sometimes you can get rid of maybe a card in your own yard. But ooh, that's K-Command in the right situations is a heck of a card.
Looking bleak here.
Yeah.
So in this situation, I might be thinking of Cryptic to like bounce either Liliana or Goyf and draw a card on my turn.
Yeah, because you know you're going to be forced to fire off the Cryptic in response to Lily's plus here. And then if you're not drawing an instant off the Cryptic draw, then you are discarding that card, so
Tap creature, bounce Lily.
huh.
I sort of like bouncing a Goyf and drawing a card, maybe, or just anything that is drawing your card there, because you'd have the chance to maybe hit like Archmage's Charm or something.
As do I. I could definitely see why Zeke would be nervous about potential Lily ult next turn. And you know, only Zeke knows how many kind of actual instant speed spells are in their deck, so it's possible that kind of did some rough math there and just figured the chances of drawing something that would just get discarded were high enough that it was worth the reset on the Lily. Okay. I like this. It's tough sledding here for Zeke to get back, kind of no matter what happens,
Okay,
but
interesting. Would you have cast a Cryptic Command immediately, or would you have waited?
I think I would wait. Because I mean, you wait for at least for Nat to go to attacks to make sure they can't drop a Bloodbraid Elf. Oh man, it's tough because this bouncing this Lily over and over again, it's just Nat's the two cards of Liliana and Tarmogoyf are just difficult cards for Zeke to deal with, and even though Zeke is kind of bicycling through his deck and kind of drawing cards, they're just kind of delaying at this point. And this was what I was nervous about with the kind of tap bounce play that we saw from Cryptic is okay.
It gets tricky when you're in the like you're behind and you're playing these decks that are have Cryptic Command in them, but then not a lot of other like super hard removal for a card like Tarmogoyf or Liliana, where you get in these like strange situations where you're like, oh, I have out sort of if I like can keep bouncing things and then draw into like a thing, or but just they're not the lines aren't always apparent like what is the right thing to do, especially when you have like Liliana on the table.
Right.
It's a pretty big team that's coming in.
So Zeke pretty much needs to flip this thing in the ice to have a chance here. Even then, Nat still has the Liliana.
And then the Bloodbraid Elf would come back.
Yeah. And this is the thing about, I noticed this with decks like Ponza, with decks like Blue Moon sometimes. You think, okay, with my post-board plan, I'll just take out the Blood Moons and I'll just kind of beat them at the mid-range game. Well, there's a lot of these decks, especially Jund, that are very good at the mid-range game. And so when you take out the Blood Moons, or you're hoping that your deck is going to beat somebody at the mid-range game, like sometimes no matter what you do, the shell is just not going to be as powerful as what they're working with if Blood Moon's not a haymaker.
Yeah, 100%. And also, I could see that strategy if you had some really like high impact cards to board into, like if you're playing Keranos God of the Storms or something that is going to be a threat that Jund is going to have a hard, if not impossible time like dealing with. But we saw Zeke's board was, maybe a slightly, some cards that gave Zeke slightly more mid-range game, but not a ton. Like, Jace Architect of Thought isn't like a deal breaker, if it gets resolved against Jund.
Yeah, a deck that I would kind of like to see is like a Teamer Moon deck because I just think Uro is such a powerful threat right now.
Oh yeah.
Um, that I think, especially if you're playing a Thought Scour build like Zeke is, it felt like we saw a lot of Zeke kind of using cards like Thought Scour to get cards in the yard, and we didn't really see him abusing that characteristic of the deck maybe as much as we could see
Okay.
in a deck that added something like Uro that could really make use of that fodder out of the yard.
I could see that being really strong. Drawing cards, playing extra land, always, a plus for a control deck. Having a threat that's hard to deal with, that's recursive. I bet your mana base gets really interesting there if you need like double green though and you're playing Blood Moon. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, I've always liked the Rug Moon decks that just have Tarmogoyf in them too. Just
Sure.
to have, you've got a big beater as well. So.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it can add the little bit you need so that when your Goyf takes on their Goyf, you've got the bolt to kind of finish things off, and it lets your burn spells go a little farther when you've got a chonky body.
All right. Well, looks like we got a lot of time left, so I'm gonna hop out of the booth and see if I can get someone else up on coverage.